Chapter 341, Heiyu's Plan. Chao Zone. It was the most chaotic and active zone in the 9 zones due to the number of races that inhabited this zone. The 10 regions in the Chaos Zone occupied a territory that was far larger than the Northern Zone. With the arrival of the Great Daoyuan Calamity and the appearance of the Blood Fiend race, the various races all chose to do different things. Some races wanted to rise up in the Great Daoyuan Calamity and lay low, waiting for an opportunity. They did not fight the Blood Fiend race in order to preserve their own strength. There were also other races and forces that fought the Blood Fiend race in order to fight for fate. Many small races were wiped out by the Blood Fiend race, and the overall population of the Chaos Zone was even reduced by 2% within a short period of time. Heretic cultivators became more and more active. They took the opportunity to kill other living beings to cultivate their evil techniques. The Great Evil Palace had been disbanded, and their leaders were nowhere to be found. The little evil king's eyes were bloodshot. He was desperate to find a treasure that could restore his third leg. Incidentally, he had just reached the Heaven Realm, and his moniker of the Alluring Demon King was famous throughout the Chaos Zone. Every time Little Evil King heard this moniker, he would be infuriated. In the Chaos Zone, the Black Moon Tower was a unique faction. They provided intelligence and sold communication talismans, myriad zone talismans, and other resources. They also traveled everywhere, occasionally burying some pillars in the mountains. Some small races and forces had dug these pillars out to take a look, only to find that they were very ordinary and only used to detect spiritual objects underground. They were not worth much. Since that was the case, it was not worth offending the Black Moon Tower over them. Of course, there were also greedy forces and cultivators who wanted to take the pillars for themselves after digging it out, wanting to refine the pillar and forge it into a weapon. However, after a few experts were killed to make an example, no one took this risk for this tiny bit of profit. There were also some major forces in the Chaos Zone that kept a close eye on the Black Moon Tower, wary of their purpose and intention. Then, Grandpa Zhang made an appearance and revealed his peak Divine Realm cultivation, intimidating them. Since the Great Daoyuan Calamity had arrived, there was no point making an additional enemy for no reason. Initially, the Blood Fiends were scattered all over the Chaos Zone. However, at some point in time, some experts and major forces suddenly realized that the Blood Fiends were gradually gathering together, specifically within 3 regions of the Chaos Zone. The forces of these 3 regions felt an imminent sense of danger, and a number of the smaller forces and races started to flee those regions. The major forces and stronger races kept trying to surround and annihilate the Blood Fiends. However, they could not kill all of them, and more powerful Blood Fiends kept appearing as time went by. Soon, things spiraled beyond the control of the major forces of those regions, and they had to retreat. The major forces that had withdrawn from the 3 regions naturally tried to fight to obtain their own territory in the regions they retreated to, causing even more chaos. This was the unique thing about the Chaos Zone. Everyone was out to secure their own benefits, and would not work together for fear of being backstabbed or being taken advantage of. More and more Blood Fiends gathered in the 3 regions, which caused everyone's attention to focus there. Why were they doing this? Was there a supreme treasure there? If the Blood Fiends confined themselves to the 3 regions, they would be happy. After all, there were still 7 regions for them to fight over. However, if the Blood Fiends went beyond the borders of those 3 regions, then they might have to come up with a plan. On a mountain peak, Heiyu looked at the Blood Fiends in the distance that were growing even more numerous as time passed. After entering the 3 regions, these Blood Fiends no longer seemed to crave battle for some reason. Heiyu had already learned about the Great Daoyuan Calamity in the Central Zone. Ji Dexin's rise and the fact that he had killed a Dao Realm Blood Fiend was even more surprising. He was too strong. Even Heiyu felt somewhat helpless. How could she catch up to a monster like Ji Dexin? Although she had no grudges with Ji Dexin, the latter would definitely eventually interfere with her plans, as well as what she wanted to do in the Central Zone. The chances of conflict breaking out between them were very high. However, after a brief moment of melancholy, Heiyu refocused herself and continued working on her plans. Since Su Shaner had come over, she could provide her with assistance. Grandpa Zhang's figure appeared and he said worriedly, "Yue, are you really confident? Are you sure that this is feasible?" "I'm 90% confident." Heiyu's expression was calm, and no emotional fluctuations could be seen on her face. "Grandpa, I was born with an incomplete divine soul. Even if it's incomplete, it still has some special qualities. I won't try to do things beyond my level of ability." Grandpa Zhang sighed. He wanted to advise Heiyu not to be so persistent about the past enmity, but given her stubbornness, how could she let it go? How could he himself let it go? It's useless even if you reach the divine realm, Zhang Han said helplessly. I'm aware of that, grandfather. Don't forget that I have master's support. Even Dao realm experts are not indestructible. Heiyu's voice was soft. The blood fiends in the three regions had congregated in endless numbers, and everyone was watching these regions nervously. They suddenly recalled that the pillars that the Black Moon Tower had buried seemed to be mainly distributed within these three regions. What did the Black Moon Tower want to do? What method did they use to attract the blood fiends to gather in those three regions? Su Shaner excitedly rushed over to the mountain peak where Heiyu was, saying, "Little Yu, everything is ready. It's about time to start." Heiyu revealed a look of anticipation. Thanks to Su Shaner's arrival, the plan's implementation had been accelerated. Little Yu, you should smile more and show more emotion. Otherwise, people will think that you're heartless. I'm used to it. Heiyu shook her head and sighed inwardly. Su Shaner was indeed her master's maidservant. She had so many strange and unique treasures with her. Looking at the dense mass of blood fiends, even Su Shaner felt somewhat apprehensive. Little Yu, are you sure about this? There shouldn't be any problems, Heiyu said with certainty. All right then. In any case, even if we fail, we can still escape. Su Shaner nodded her head. Chapter 342, Heiyu's Surprise Part 1. Chuzan had also noticed the changes in the Chaos Zone, but he did not pay much attention to it. Instead, he focused on the reincarnation Tao principle, laying groundwork for the future establishment of the reincarnation cycle in the Northern Zone, and then the other 8 zones. This would take time though. The reincarnation Tao principle was not strong enough. In addition, he needed the heavenly Tao laws to become stronger as well. Chuzan was somewhat helpless in this regard. Strength was the foundation. Without sufficient strength, it was no doubt a delusional dream to complete the reincarnation cycle. Chuzan was only planning for the future and planning ahead. The heavenly Tao laws had to be on par with the great Tao, or even stronger. Chuzan also pondered on the great Tao. He even suspected that this great Tao only belonged to the 9 zones. Was there a great Tao outside the 9 zones? A great Tao of the chaos? Was that where the previous Daoyuan realm experts had all gone to? Where was the chaos? Of course, all of this was just speculation. If he wanted to learn these secrets, he would first need to reach their level. Chuzan stayed in the courtyard, occasionally paying attention to the situation in the western zone to avoid being surprised by any scheme wrought by that hidden expert. He was waiting for the 50-year milestone reward. With the appearance of the strange black power, the future was uncertain. The great Tao calamity might descend at any time, and he was not prepared. Other than the expansion of the heavenly Tao laws, there was no way to accelerate the growth of his cultivation level. Still, Chuzan knew that it was useless to be anxious, as that would lead to mistakes. Your disciple, Heiyu, has summoned a portion of the laws of heaven and earth and replaced them with the heavenly Tao laws. She killed the blood fiends in the 3 regions and gathered the blood-colored spiritual energy into the spirit-searching pillar to fight for fate amidst the great Daoyuan calamity. Her cultivation level has soared and her fate has been transformed. Your fate Tao principle has advanced. Your disciple Heiyu has reached the divine realm. You have been rewarded with a lump of chaotic energy. Your maidservant, Su Shaner, assisted your disciple, Heiyu, in setting up a plan to exterminate the blood fiends in the 3 regions and successfully fought for fate amidst the great Daoyuan calamity. Her cultivation level has soared and her fate has been transformed. Your fate Tao principle has advanced. Your maidservant, Su Shaner, has reached the divine realm. You have been rewarded with a lump of chaotic energy. A series of system rewards suddenly arrived. Chuzan was pleasantly surprised. As expected of the disciple he valued, Heiyu was in charge of the implementation of the heavenly Tao talisman plan, and she did not disappoint him. After a long period of planning, she had finally reaped the rewards. Furthermore, Su Shaner also benefited from this arrangement. Chuzan turned his attention to the Chaos Zone. At this moment, the 3 regions were covered in a thick blood-colored spiritual energy, which was being absorbed by the spirit-searching pillar buried underground. Heiyu had discovered this special method from the Myriad Artifacts scripture and the Myriad Formations scripture, and had used it to absorb the blood-colored spiritual energy. This was one of the more effective ways to deal with the blood fiend race. The disadvantage was that it was not easy to make these special pillars. A special material had to be injected into these pillars, one that was relatively rare in the 9 zones. Still, she had managed to make enough of them to exterminate all of the blood fiends in those 3 regions. After Heiyu's fate had transformed, Chuzan could see that she was now someone who shouldered the fate of the Great Tao. Su Shan'er benefited from this as well. Although she only provided support, she had still put in a lot of effort. As such, she too now shouldered the fate of the Great Tao. As for what it meant to shoulder the fate of the Great Tao, even Chuzan did not know. Perhaps he would be able to figure this out once Su Shan'er returned to the small courtyard. The experts in the Chaos Zone were shocked. There had been so many blood fiends there, yet they had been exterminated in one fell swoop. How did the Black Moon Tower do it? Moreover, with so many blood fiends killed, would the dense blood-colored spiritual energy not give birth to extremely terrifying blood fiends? Could it be that the Black Moon Tower was going to create a powerful blood fiend? Once an unstoppable blood fiend appeared, disaster would undoubtedly descend upon the Chaos Zone. Could the Black Moon Tower really deal with that? Thinking this, many forces and races put their armies on high alert, waiting to see what the Black Moon Tower's plans were. Chapter 343, Heiyu's Surprise Part 2. After all, the Blood Fiend race was special. Killing blood fiends was easy enough, especially in the initial stages, but that was only the start of the problems. Unbelievably, as time passed, many experts were surprised to find that the blood-colored spiritual energy in the 3 regions was slowly fading. What did this mean? Had the Black Moon Tower really mastered a method of completely eliminating blood fiends? Many forces revealed greedy expressions, especially some of the races who had been eyeing the chance to rise up during this calamity to restore the glory of their race. Sure, the Black Moon Tower was very powerful, but greed and temptation were powerful driving forces that could make one lose their sense of rationality. As such, some races began to discuss the possibility of a secret alliance to seize this method from the Black Moon Tower. The blood-colored spiritual energy in the 3 regions continued to weaken. As it did, the heavenly Tao laws also rapidly devoured the laws of heaven and earth in those regions. The day the blood-colored spiritual energy dissipated entirely would be the day the heavenly Tao laws took over those 3 regions. In addition to those 3 regions, the heavenly Tao laws also infiltrated the other 7 regions of the Chaos Zone, albeit at a much slower pace. Heiyu's plan was immaculate, and her execution was precise. Chuzan was very satisfied with this disciple of his. When Heiyu returned to the central zone, he believed that she would be able to come up with a plan to increase the rate of expansion of the heavenly Tao laws there as well. The only obstacle was probably Ji Dexin. Chuzan hoped that Ji Dexin would not interfere with Heiyu's plans in the future. If necessary, Chuzan felt that he could knock him down a peg or 2. If things really came to a head, Chuzan might have to look for an opportunity to kill him. The question he had to answer before that, though, was whether the hidden expert in the Western Zone was collaborating or communicating with Ji Dexin. Chuzan was waiting for the 3 regions to be incorporated into the heavenly Tao laws, which would increase his cultivation level again. As almost the entire population of blood fiends in the Chaos Zone had congregated there, the blood-colored spiritual energy was extremely dense, and would take quite some time to dissipate. As for those races in the Chaos Zone scheming against the Black Moon Tower, they were irrelevant. Heiyu had definitely foreseen this, and had probably factored it into her own plan. Perhaps those races would become her stepping stone as she fought for more fate during the Great Daoyuan calamity. The 9 zones were at war, and countless small races either rose up, or went extinct. The monster zone was rife with such affairs. Given the violent nature of these monsters, they killed each other as well as the blood fiends. A number of tribes had already been eradicated due to this. Hutianya had gathered the Heavenly Tiger tribe's forces, as well as roped in other monster tribes with special abilities. They had been biding their time this entire time, choosing only to defend themselves. He was waiting for an opportunity, one that would become a turning point in this war. Only then would he be able to reap a bountiful harvest. Hutianya's bloodline was continuously transforming, and the aura of the divine beast was becoming more and more apparent around him. His bloodline could suppress the entire Heavenly Tiger tribe. This excited the elders of the Heavenly Tiger tribe to no end. The Heavenly Tiger tribe would rise amidst this calamity. Chuzan hoped that Hutianya wouldn't let him down. He did not expect this little tiger to be as capable as Heiyu, but he had his own expectations for this disciple. Hutianya's rise and the fate transformation would provide a huge boost to the Heavenly Tao Law's expansion. Western Zone, Ding Yu and Xiao Liang were still fighting with Blood Fiend race. Unexpectedly, it seemed that the Blood Fiend race seemed to be holding back somewhat. It almost seemed as if they no longer wanted to conquer the entire western zone. Something felt very wrong here. These blood fiends seemed to be planning something, or perhaps they were waiting for an opportunity. In the southern zone, Feng Kong, together with Wang Luo and Shang Xing, were trying to find a way to deal with the massive ancient battlefield in the central region. If they did not deal with this ancient battlefield, Feng Kong would not be able to leave. The situation in the southern region was relatively stable. Shang Bang was hunting down blood fiends everywhere to control the situation in the southern region. He realized that the more he fought them, and the better he controlled the situation, the more his fate seemed to transform. The Tao realm was no longer an impossible goal for him. A month later, the blood-colored spiritual energy in the 3 regions of the Chaos Zone finally dissipated completely. Your heavenly Tao laws have taken over 3 regions in the Chaos Zone. You have been rewarded with 3 cultivation level advancements. Winking Face, Chapter 344, Heiyu's Surprise Part 3. The cultivation advancement reward had finally arrived. Chu Zan received his reward. His Tao principles were continuously refined and perfected. At the same time, he had comprehended a new Tao principle. Chu Zan was immersed in his state of comprehension as his cultivation level soared. 19th level of the Tao realm. He was another step closer to the 36th level of the Tao realm. As this was happening, divine realm experts from more than 20 races suddenly surrounded Heiyu. Grandpa Zhang stood beside her, his brows slightly furrowed. Heiyu was not surprised by this, and there was no change in her expression. At this moment, she was immersed in the heavenly Tao laws around her. The power of a region's heavenly Tao laws were at least equivalent to a Tao realm expert. Although Heiyu did not have a clear understanding of how strong that was, she somehow could sense that innately. Furthermore, this was merely the power of a single region's heavenly Tao laws. Su Shaner was eager to start the fight. The fact that she was surrounded did not bother her at all. After breaking through to the divine realm, she had been looking for someone to test her strength on. As fate would have it, some people just happened to come knocking on her door. A foreign race with fur on his face and a pair of small wings on his back walked out as the negotiator. A 7th level divine realm expert. He was not weak. Someone with this level of strength was usually the pillar of support for a small race in the Chaos Zone. We don't intend to become enemies with the Black Moon Tower. However, the great Daoyuan calamity has descended, and the blood fiends are wreaking havoc everywhere. They are the common enemy of every living being in the 9 zones. As such, we all have the responsibility to destroy the blood fiend race and restore the 9 zones to its former state. Since the Black Moon Tower has a method to destroy the blood fiends, I hope that the master of the Black Moon Tower will not be stingy in sharing this method with the rest of us. Of course, we won't take it for free. We'll trade treasures for the method. On the other side, some human divine realm experts from some of the forces of the Chaos Zone appeared. These humans were either fugitives who had offended a big force or were sinners driven away due to their unpardonable crimes. These human experts would usually not work together, and would even kill each other. Some of them were spies from the branches of the human forces in the Chaos Zone. However, at this moment, they were all here. How dare you covet the secret method of our human race, you ant? A human expert sneered. The experts from the small races all had ugly expressions. It remains to be seen as to whether the human race can survive this calamity. Don't be too arrogant, or you will find yourselves in trouble once you are no longer an overlord race. HMPH. What a joke. With this secret method, how can the human race not survive the great Daoyuan? You small races should be sensible and surrender obediently. Otherwise, you won't have a chance when the human race dominates the entire 9 zones. A human expert threatened. Heiyu looked on coldly. Whether it was the foreign races or the human race, both sides had ulterior motives. There were not many good people in the Chaos Zone, simply because good people would not come here, and many who did would not survive here. Even the people who had been persecuted and escaped here, who were not black-hearted and ruthless in the beginning, after experiencing life and strife in the Chaos Zone, would gradually change. Because if they did not, they would not survive. Chapter 345, Heavenly Punishment Part 1. Tower Master Heiyu, how can the human race's secret method fall into the hands of outsiders? A human expert cupped his hands and said, the great Daoyuan calamity is an opportunity for the entire human race. Tower Master is a proud heavens blessed of the human race and has made an enormous contribution by creating this secret method to eliminate the blood fiends. However, Tower Master, the Black Moon Tower is insufficient to fully unleash the power of this secret method and make full use of it. Alone, you might be targeted by the other races. It would be best to pass it on to us so that we can work together to ensure the rise of the human race. When Su Shan'er heard this, she gritted her teeth in anger. These people were really shameless. Yu, however, had a calm expression on her face. She was not angry at all, nor did she pretend to be polite to these people. If you want the secret method, just be upfront about it. There's no need to put on a show to justify your greed. I'll give you a chance. If you retreat now, I won't hold it against you. If you still intend to seize the secret method, then you'll have to pay for it with your lives. The expressions of the experts from both sides darkened when they heard this. The Tower Master of the Black Moon Tower was being arrogant. They were all Divine Realm experts, and there were a number of 7th and 8th level Divine Realm experts in their ranks. Even a peak Divine Realm expert would not be able to escape their grasp. Where did her confidence come from? A human expert stepped forth, the cold aura around his body swept out in every direction. Since that's the case, don't blame us for not considering our relationship as fellow humans. Shua. Suddenly, the shadow of a whip flew by and lashed out at him. The human expert's expression turned cold as he punched the whip. Pa, pa, the whip vibrated, and ice and fire appeared on it at the same time, instantly shattering the opponent's punch. Immediately after, the ice and fire swirled around and instantly enveloped the human expert. The one who attacked was obviously Su Shan'er. These hypocrites had pissed her off too much. Then, the rest of the Divine Realm experts from both sides charged. Since you won't hand it over, don't blame us for being ruthless. There were dozens of them. Yu's expression was calm, but her eyes flashed with a cold gleam. Since you all have a death wish, I'll grant your wish. She raised her slender hand, and a power that seemed to control all life erupted. At the same time, a mark appeared on her forehead. The Heavenly Tao Seal. Su Shan'er stopped her attack and looked at Yu in surprise. This power was very familiar. Her eyes flickered, and she soon came to a realization. Boom! Facing these Divine Realm experts, Yu was not the slightest bit concerned. Grandpa Zhang, on the other hand, was very nervous. Even though he knew Yu possessed some extraordinary skills, going against this many divine experts at once was still dangerous. However, what he did not understand was how large the gap was between the Divine Realm and the Tao Realm. No matter how many Divine Realm cultivators were on the other side, it did not matter. A Divine Realm expert who was charging over suddenly sensed that the world had suddenly changed, though he could not tell what the difference was. As such, he chalked it up to being the results of having this many Divine Realm experts acting in unison. No one made the first move. Instead, they approached step by step, constantly putting pressure on Yu. After all, the first one to make a move would definitely not end up well. Since that was the case, they would attack together and slowly force the Black Moon Tower to submit. These Divine Realm cultivators were not stupid. Grandpa Zhang was a peak Divine Realm expert. Whoever attacked first would bear the brunt of his fury and would most likely end up dead. Seeing this, even Su Shan'er felt a little worried. Yu's expression remained calm the entire time. The Heavenly Tao Seal on her forehead glowed faintly, and that power that could control all life fused with the Heavenly Tao laws. At this moment, Yu's entire being seemed to have sublimated, transforming her into a supreme existence that ruled over all life. Of course, it was just an illusion. Even if she cultivated the Heavenly Tao scripture and was compatible with the power of the Heavenly Tao laws, she could not completely control the Heavenly Tao laws. The Heavenly Tao Seal was the channel by which she controlled the Heavenly Tao laws. Glancing at the approaching Divine Realm experts, Yu remained silent. She had given them their chance. Chapter 346, Heavenly Punishment Part 2. They had spurned her offer. Still, this was also within her expectations. After all, how could dozens of Divine Realm cultivators be frightened away by mere words? One had to demonstrate strength before being feared. In the other 7 regions of the Chaos Zone, pillars of light emerged from the ground at this moment, emitting strange energy fluctuations. In the small courtyard, Chu Zan sat on his recliner, leisurely drinking a pot of tea. He was used to Su Shan'er making tea for him, but she was not around at the moment, so he had to do it himself. Chu Zan was not used to this. As expected, it was easy to go from hardship to luxury, but not the other way around. Chu Zan sighed. Su Shan'er had reached the Divine Realm. Her fate had also changed. It was time for her to come back. It had been a long time since he had eaten the delicacies Su Shan'er cooked. Chu Yun also left the Chu family's territory and journeyed around the ancient battlefields of the northern zone. As long as she was in the northern zone, Chu Yun would not be in danger. After all, this entire zone was under Chu Zan's control. Chu Zan suddenly put down his teacup and looked at the chaos zone through the lens of the heavenly Tao laws. Dozens of divine realm experts were pressuring He Yu. He looked on silently. Both him and He Yu knew this would happen when the Black Moon Tower destroyed the Blood Fiend race. Chu Zan saw He Yu activating the heavenly Tao seal. The heavenly Tao scripture she cultivated had the power to control all life, and it was fusing with the heavenly Tao laws for the first time. Despite what was going on around her, she remained completely calm, and not even a trace of her aura leaked out. However, the 3 regions were already under her control, and she could now wield the power of the heavenly Tao laws. Of course, He Yu's current strength was still lacking, so she could not completely control it or unleash its full power, even with the heavenly Tao seal. Chu Zan looked on silently. He did not stop He Yu's actions, nor the fusion of her power with the heavenly Tao laws. He knew that she was making preparations to go to the central zone after this to continue the expansion of the heavenly Tao laws, as well as for her own matters. Unlike the chaos zone, there were no regions in the central zone that were currently under the control of the heavenly Tao laws. The one that was the closest to completion was the Qian region, where Qianming was. 2/3 of the laws of heaven and earth there had been devoured by the heavenly Tao laws. In order to implement her plan, He Yu would no doubt make that her first destination. Furthermore, once the heavenly Tao laws had taken over the Qian region, she would be able to, like now, use the power of the heavenly Tao laws to protect herself. In any case, as the heavenly Tao laws were similar to the laws of heaven and earth, it was nearly impossible for her actions to lead to the discovery of the heavenly Tao talisman plan, especially given the turbulent state the 9 zones was in due to the great Daoyuan calamity. To the eyes of those around her, she was just borrowing the power of the laws of heaven and earth. Chu Zan looked on silently. He Yu still had not made her move, simply watching her enemies approach calmly. Beside him, Grandpa Zhang was very nervous. If He Yu's plan did not work out, he had to be prepared to fight to the death to help He Yu break out of this encirclement, which in itself was very unlikely. Su Shan'er was also a little nervous, but she was not afraid. Grandpa Zhang looked at Su Shan'er. Seeing her not afraid or worried, he heaved a sigh of relief. Su Shan'er's identity was not ordinary. If she was not afraid or worried, then it meant that the problem was not big. Chu Zan frowned slightly. He Yu was not just targeting these divine realm cultivators. He could sense that there were changes taking place in the other 7 regions of the chaos zone. The heavenly Tao laws there seemed to be waiting for an opportunity to devour a portion of the laws of heaven and earth there. Chu Zan laughed, as expected of the disciple he valued. Chapter 347, Heavenly Punishment Part 3. He Yu had her ways. If she succeeded, the progress of the heavenly Tao law's expansion into those 7 regions would be greatly increased. Looking at the He Yu, Chu Zan could not help but think of Ji Dexin, the reincarnation of a half-saint of the celestial race. In terms of identity, he was He Yu's elder brother from a different mother. Perhaps he should focus on nurturing He Yu so that she could compete with Ji Dexin. Chu Zan did not want Ji Dexin to monopolize the fate from the great Daoyuan calamity. Furthermore, He Yu's plans would likely cause her to come into conflict with Ji Dexin. Qianming was powerful, but compared to Ji Dexin, he was still lacking. Furthermore, he lacked He Yu's planning ability and foresight. Among his disciples, perhaps only Qin Ying could compare to He Yu in terms of planning and schemes. He Yu looked at the approaching divine realm experts, who were about a mile away. "I'll warn you again, don't let greed destroy you. Don't seek your own death." He Yu warned again. The divine realm experts remained silent. Who was she trying to scare? There were dozens of them, so what was there to fear? No matter what kind of trump card she had, it would be useless against their numbers. If that's the case, then die. He Yu raised her hand and waved it. The sky turned purple, after which purple lightning bolts suddenly descended upon the divine realm experts. Roar! The expressions of the divine realm experts changed, as they channeled their auras and spiritual power to resist the lightning bolts. What kind of lightning was this? Lightning generated by the laws of heaven and earth. They all felt a strong sense of danger. The lightning bolts seemed like heavenly punishment. He Yu coldly uttered, "This is the punishment for your greed." Ah! Some divine realm experts screamed as they were turned into ashes by the lightning bolts. "Let me go, I was wrong." The remaining Divine Realm experts started to beg for mercy. They could not die. They were the pillars of their races. Heiyu looked on in silence as they fell, one after another. The deaths of these Divine Realm experts seemed to fuel the heavenly Tao laws, as it expanded rapidly into the other 7 regions. With the deaths of the pillars of these smaller races, the fate of various smaller races were severed, and the laws of heaven and earth in those regions were thrown into chaos. This gave the heavenly Tao laws the opportunity they needed to quickly devour and replace the laws of heaven and earth there. In front of Heiyu, anguished cries for mercy kept echoing in the surroundings. This heavenly punishment was simply impossible to resist. Chapter 348, Heavenly Punishment Part 4. Chuzan watched as the Divine Realm experts fell one after another, turning into dust. He felt that it was a pity. If these Divine Realm experts became ghosts, the ghost race's strength would increase significantly, as would the Ghost Tao principle in the ghost world. Chuzan decided to hold on to the divine souls of these Divine Realm experts. After Chuzan made up his mind, he used the Heavenly Tao talisman to capture the remnant soul of a Divine Realm expert, who was about to turn into ashes. There was no need for a complete divine soul, a remnant soul was enough. After submerging it in the river of Styx, it would become a ghost, and its Divine Realm foundation would allow it to quickly cultivate back up to its peak strength. Chuzan connected the ghost world to the 3 regions, transferring the remnant soul over. As for the remnant soul's memories, Chuzan decided to make some adjustments to it, choosing only to allow the remnant soul to retain memories of its race and cultivation. After entering the river of Styx, it would take some time for it to be reborn as a ghost. The stronger one was, the longer it would take for them to be reborn. Chuzan was overjoyed. A portion of the Divine Realm experts had already died, but there were still half that he could turn into ghosts. Once their transformation was completed, the ghost race's strength would rise. Chuzan did not hide his actions from Heiyu. She was momentarily stunned. Master had intervened. Was she being too ruthless to these Divine Realm experts? That should not be the case. Master was not a soft-hearted person. Then, she felt that those remnant souls were being sucked away by a force. Heiyu suddenly understood. Master wanted to turn those remnant souls into ghosts. The surviving Divine Realm experts turned pale with fright. Had their actions incited the anger of the heavens? Had the Black Moon Tower's achievement of exterminating the blood fiends earned the favor of the heavens? Heavenly punishment was something that they had only heard of in legends, and it had not been reported in the 9 zones since the ancient era. However, it had actually appeared today. And it was so terrifying. Did it have something to do with the Great Daoyuan calamity? The onlookers were terrified as well and fled, afraid of being caught up in the devastation. Heiyu stood on the mountain peak, looking around at the empty surroundings. There was no change in her expression, nor any display of emotions. Beside her, Grandpa Zhang had yet to recover from the shock. His granddaughter's methods were beyond his imagination. Dozens of Divine Realm experts had been slain within such a short period of time. Su Shan'er looked at Heiyu curiously, not so much because of her power, but rather marveling at how calm and collected she was amidst all this. Chuzan's voice then entered Heiyu's mind. Come back before you go to the central zone. Chapter 349, A Hero in Life and a Hero in Death. Yes, Master. After finishing up, Heiyu began to retrieve the pillars that were buried within the 3 regions. Each one had turned shockingly red after absorbing the blood-colored spiritual energy. These pillars were still useful, so Heiyu put them away. The situation in the Chaos Zone was still unstable, so Heiyu would have to remain here for some time to put the finishing touches on her plan. The little evil king had made quite a name for himself in the Chaos Zone. He wanted revenge. Naturally, the target of his revenge was naturally the evil son. However, the evil son had disappeared, and he received some information that the evil son was the reincarnation of the Great Evil Palace's founder's soul. Therefore, his enemy was the patriarch of the Great Evil Palace. However, the Great Evil Palace had been disbanded, and its leaders were nowhere to be found. As such, he could only give up for the time being and focus on increasing his cultivation. Strength was essential in his pursuit of revenge, as well as to rise up during the Great Daoyuan calamity. Furthermore, perhaps one of these ancient battlefields contained a heavenly treasure that could restore his third leg. Duyuan was also in the Chaos Zone, and his strength had also improved after fighting for fate during the calamity. At this moment, Chuzan had no reason to pay them any mind. His focus was on the Central Zone, and finding a method for Heiyu to compete with Ji Dexin. Her current strength was insufficient to accomplish this task, though, After all, one had to know that Ji Dexin could reach the Tao realm at will. The central zone was in a mess. The sky was still red. The blood fiends continued to appear in various places, but they did not descend from the sky again. Still, they were endless, as waves upon waves of blood fiends invaded, causing countless deaths among the human race's army. Occasionally, a Tao realm blood fiend would be born. The entire central zone was being overrun by the blood fiends. Fortunately, the forces of the human race in the central zone were powerful. Otherwise, it would have fallen long ago. Countless formation masters, restriction masters, artifact refiners, alchemists, and the like, were all gathered within the alliance, researching how to eliminate the blood fiends. The efficiency of the current methods they had was too low, and the cost was not proportional to the effect. Qianming had already risen to prominence. He had swept away countless blood fiends in the Qian region. None of the Heaven Realm blood fiends were his match. Furthermore, every time, he would kill the blood fiends completely, preventing them from reviving. The power of the Heaven and Earth myriad transformation technique was on full display at this moment, which made countless geniuses envious. Chu Zan looked at the central zone. Apart from the Qian region, the progress of the heavenly Tao laws in the other 9 regions was progressing slowly. The ghost race was also active in the central zone. Many human cultivators who died in battle were lucky enough to escape with their divine souls. Since they could not reform their physical bodies, many of them chose to become ghosts. The ghost race also participated in the fight for fate amidst the calamity in the central zone. Ji Dexin was wary of the ghost race. He felt that there was something unusual about the ghost race. How had this race suddenly appeared in the 9 zones? When he searched his memories, he drew similarities between the ghost race and the netherworld race. However, the latter race had already perished during the Great Daoyuan calamity. Was the ghost race a remnant of that netherworld race? Or had they obtained the netherworld race's inheritance and transformed into this strange new race? It did not seem to make sense. There were indeed similarities between the 2 races, but there were also clear differences as well. If it was only a partial inheritance, then he would be able to rest easy. After all, that would mean that their inheritance was incomplete, and that they were not very powerful. In any case, it was not suitable to deal with the ghost race at the moment. After all, the ghost race was also helping them to deal with the blood fiends, which undoubtedly reduced some of the pressure on the human race. Most importantly, most of the ghosts were once humans. They had retained their memories, and were still attached to their former forces. Furthermore, as the number of ghosts increased and their strength grew, gradually, such a rumor spread in the central zone. A hero in life and a hero in death. Even if I'm a ghost, I'll still fight for the human race. As these slogans spread, the human experts became more and more motivated. Even if they died in battle, they would simply become ghosts and rejoin the battle. For this reason, cultivators would deliberately leave behind a wisp of their divine soul before they went to battle. If they were to die, this wisp would transform into a ghost. The ghost race rapidly expanded. This battle was an opportunity for the ghost race, and the ghost world and ghost Tao principle grew continually. Fengdu Ghost King's strength also increased. The news of the heavenly punishment's appearance in the chaos zone then spread to the central zone. Ji Dexin's expression changed when he heard this. Heavenly punishment? How is that possible? He had a look of disbelief on his face. Heavenly punishment only existed when the immortal, celestial, and demon races existed in the 9 zones. Impossible. How could there be heavenly punishment? No such law exists in the 9 zones' current laws of heaven and earth. Ji Dexin frowned. He carefully examined the information and description provided. From the information he gleaned, it was indeed heavenly punishment. Dozens of divine realm experts had been killed. What's going on? Did the laws of heaven and earth in the chaos zone change because of the Great Daoyuan calamity? That should be impossible. It shouldn't be able to create a new rule out of nowhere. None of the current laws could be transformed into the heavenly punishment law. This Great Daoyuan calamity seemed to be very different from all of the previous ones. The heavenly punishment law had existed to prevent any race from surpassing the 3 overlord races of that time, and was also used to temper geniuses. Only by surviving the heavenly punishment could one break through to the Tao realm and achieve sublimation. Ever since the 3 races had left the 9 zones, the heavenly punishment had never reappeared. Perhaps it was some kind of formation. Hey you! In his mind, the image of that expressionless young girl appeared. No matter what she encountered, she always had a calm expression, and no emotional fluctuations could be seen. Is she going to return to the central zone? It was inevitable, she would definitely return to take revenge on the Tianyu Tower. Unless the Ji family messed with her, they should not come into conflict. Ji Dexin was thinking about what he should do after Heiyu returned. Should he stop her from targeting the Tianyu Tower? This would make him Heiyu's enemy. Although he was not afraid of her, she was still an unknown variable. Would she obey his instructions as the alliance's leader? After some thought, Ji Dexin decided to wait for her to arrive and then decide how he would approach this issue based on the situation. Chapter 350. Something's Not Quite Right in the Nine Zones Part 1. Chu Zan waited for Heiyu and Su Shaner to return. During this time, another Dao realm expert from the demon race turned bald. Another Buddhist had been born. Mo Tu even ran over to thank Chu Zan for his guidance. He even bragged in front of Hong Yuanchu and the others that a bald demon was even stronger than a regular demon, which was true. Other than the fact that the bald demon would occasionally put his palms together and chant, Amitabha, he was the perfect warrior. Chu Zan felt that he had to reach the Daoyuan realm as soon as possible and become stronger than Mo Tu. Otherwise, if Mo Tu found out that something was wrong, there would be trouble. He was not sure if his awe-inspiring persona was sufficient to deter him. No matter what, as long as his strength increased, he would be able to deal with all kinds of unexpected situations. Southern Zone. Fengkong, Wang Luo, and Shangxing had joined forces and had already found a way to deal with that strange ancient battlefield. They were currently in the midst of making preparations. After dealing with this ancient battlefield, Fengkong was going to leave for the Central Zone. He was a Dao realm cultivator. If he continued to stay in the Southern Zone, he would probably trigger the descent of a Dao realm blood fiend. Wang Luo was also preparing to go to the Central Zone, leaving Shangxing to handle the Southern Zone. Time flew by, and a year passed. Chu Zan could sense that the heavenly Dao laws in the Chaos Zone were rapidly expanding in the remaining 7 regions. Heiyu had completed her preparations and was ready to return to the Northern Zone. Your disciples, Wang Luo and Shangxing, have suppressed the nascent blood world. Their fate has been transformed and their cultivation has soared. Your fate Dao principle has advanced. Your follower, Fengkong, suppressed the nascent blood world. His fate has transformed and his Dao principle has advanced. Your fate Dao principle has advanced. The system's reward suddenly arrived. Nascent blood world. Chu Zan was stunned. The unusual ancient battlefield that appeared in the central region of the Southern Zone was actually a nascent blood world. The blood world could continuously give birth to blood fiends and even make the blood fiend race a true race of the 9 zones. Fengkong, Wang Luo, and Shangxing had joined forces to suppress it. Now, their fate had been transformed and they were now shouldering the fate of the Great Dao. Chu Zan pondered, what did it mean to be a person shouldering the fate of the Great Dao? After Heiyu and Su Shaner returned, he would check it out. Fengkong also gained a lot. After his Dao principle had advanced, he had broken through to the 2nd level of the Dao realm. The Great Daoyuan calamity was indeed a great opportunity. However, it was also a great crisis. Chu Zan looked to the Western Zone and frowned. Ding Yu and Xiao Liang did not seem to be doing too well recently. Had something changed in the Western Zone? Was it due to the blood fiend race itself, or had the hidden expert intervened again? Although the situation was stable for the time being, the blood fiends were getting more and more ferocious, putting great pressure on the human cultivator army. Half a month later, your heavenly Dao laws have devoured and replaced the laws of heaven and earth of the central region of the Southern Zone. Your cultivation level has advanced. After the suppression of the nascent blood world, the heavenly Dao laws quickly devoured the laws of heaven and earth of the central region of the Southern Zone. Not long after, the central region became the newest addition to the regions under the heavenly Dao law's control. Chu Zan received his cultivation boost reward. 20th level of the Dao realm. He was only 16 levels away from the final level of the Dao realm. He still needed the heavenly Dao laws to take over 16 regions. There were 7 regions in the Chaos Zone and 10 regions in the Central Zone. If these 2 zones were incorporated into the heavenly Dao laws, he would achieve his goal. The next step would then be to open his Dao path. Chu Zan thought about it. The Dao realm cultivators from the primordial land had not entered the calamity, so there was still time. Chu Pingfan had entered the eastern zone. It was time for this extreme Dao cultivator to shine. Wang Luo and Fengkong set off for the central zone. At the same time, Heiyu and Su Shaner had also returned to the northern zone. Chu Zan sat on the chair, very leisurely. The calamity was non-existent in the northern zone. Those ancient battlefields, and the blood fiends within them, had all been purified by him in advance. In the entire 9 zones, only the northern zone was peaceful. The cultivators here were all confused. Why had the great Daoyuan calamity not arrived yet? Was it due to how barren the northern zone was before this? Perhaps it would arrive later. Sir, I'm back. Su Shaner excitedly ran in. Heiyu followed closely behind her. Greetings, Master. Well done. Chu Zan nodded. At this moment, Chu Zan saw something extraordinary. There was a vast and mysterious light hidden inside Heiyu's body. It was the aura of fate. The fate of the great Tao. The light inside Su Shaner's body was slightly weaker. Chapter 351. Something's not quite right in the 9 zones Part 2. Those who shouldered the fate of the great Tao would obtain the aura of fate of the great Tao, allowing them to pry into the great Tao. This would open the path for them to reach the Tao realm. The aura of fate of the great Tao was equivalent to a key to the Tao realm. Stepping into the Tao realm would no longer be difficult for them. Chu Zan finally understood why so many Tao realm experts emerged during the great Daoyuan calamity. This was the true reason they fought for fate. Furthermore, even if they reached the Tao realm during the calamity, if they continued fighting for fate, like Fengkong, their Tao principles would advance, as would their cultivation levels. After he figured out the purpose of the aura of fate, Chu Zan focused on his other priorities. Heiyu would return to the central zone, so Chu Zan had instructed her to come back to strengthen her cultivation foundation. The central zone's blood fiends are ferocious and there are Tao realm blood fiends among them. You should meet up with Wang Luo and Fengkong. Fengkong is a second-level Tao realm expert who is much stronger than those half-crippled Tao realm experts of the central zone. He will be fighting for fate there as well. Furthermore, he was once a human king, so he's quite knowledgeable about the secrets of the 9 zones. Fengkong would be able to provide support for Heiyu. Otherwise, without the support of a Tao realm expert, it would take a long time for Heiyu to prepare her plan and implement it. With Fengkong's assistance, she could be bolder. Ji Dexin is no ordinary person. He has the ability to enter the Tao realm whenever he decides to. For the time being, try not to provoke him. As for what he's planning, that's not important. Heiyu's eyes flickered. Ji Dexin was not an ordinary person. If even her master said that Ji Dexin was extraordinary, then he had to be more than just a genius of the Ji family. Master, what's so special about him? It was hard to say whether or not she would have a conflict with Ji Dexin. Heiyu was not a person who would give in. Chu Zan thought for a moment and smiled. He's just the reincarnation of an expert from a powerful race that has disappeared from the 9 zones. It doesn't matter what he's planning. He probably has his reasons for reincarnating into the Ji family. Also, the Ji family's human king is not an ordinary expert, he continued. Heiyu's heart trembled. Ji Dexin was the reincarnation of an expert. Furthermore, he was not from the human race. It was no wonder he was so monstrous. What was the purpose of his reincarnation? Master, can you tell me about his background? Chu Zan nodded. He's the reincarnation of a half-saint of the celestial race, which, by our current standards, is someone who has reached the peak of the Tao realm. If you want to compete with him or obstruct his plans, you'll need to become stronger, he said after some thought. No matter what Ji Dexin's intentions were, it was necessary to have someone who could compete with him. Since the 3 races had already left the 9 territories, why did they come back? In the future, the 9 zones would be his territory. He could not allow some outsiders to mess with his territory. Next, Chu Zan prepared some treasures for Heiyu to strengthen her cultivation foundation. Heiyu stayed for a month in the scripture pavilion Chu Zan had prepared for her. These were all the secret manuals and records rewarded by the system. Chu Zan made a copy of them and placed it in the Pocket Dimensions scripture pavilion. His disciples would be able to read and refer to these things when they needed to. Regardless of whether it was Wang Luo, Shang Xing, or Heiyu, the methods they had used during the Great Daoyuan calamity had been derived from the methods he had left earlier in this scripture pavilion. Of course, they added their own adjustments and improvements to them. A month later, Heiyu bade Chu Zan farewell and set off on her journey back to the central zone. Su Shaner did not follow, and returned to her duties as a maidservant. Chu Zan's life once again became leisurely. With a maidservant taking care of him, his life became even more comfortable. Your disciple, Qian Ming, has entered the divine realm. You have been rewarded with a lump of chaotic energy. A few days after Qian Ming reached the divine realm, Qin Ying also broke through. Your in-name disciple, Qin Ying, has entered the divine realm. You have been rewarded with a lump of chaotic energy. A few days after Qin Ying's breakthrough, the system's reward arrived again. Your nephew, Chu Pingfan, has displayed the might of the extreme Tao and killed many blood fiends. His fate has increased, and his cultivation level has skyrocketed. He has reached the heaven realm. Your fate Tao principle has advanced. As his fate Tao principle continued to advance, Chu Zan could already vaguely sense some changes. It seemed to be moving toward becoming a great Tao principle. Still, it was insufficient for him to pry into the changes happening to the fate of the 9 zones. He then thought of the strange black power of the great Tao. Would it spread to the 9 zones? Did it herald the beginning of the great Tao calamity? Heiyu then returned to the central zone in a very low-key manner. Her return did not attract any attention. Chapter 352. Something's not quite right in the 9 zones Part 3. Qian Region, Qian Mountain. Qian Mountain was the territory in which Qian Ming resided. Heiyu, Wang Luo and Feng Kong had all made their way here as well. For the time being, all three were keeping a low profile, especially Feng Kong. If he started killing the Dao realm blood fiends in the central zone, it would probably trigger changes in the Great Dao Yuan calamity. Therefore, Feng Kong was not in a hurry to make a move. Heiyu was already making plans with the assistance of Wang Luo and Qian Ming. One blood-colored pillar after another was piled up on Qian Mountain. Mysterious runes were engraved on it. The modified blood-colored pillars were then buried in some of the Qian region's earth veins. This was done secretly in order to avoid attracting attention. The waters of the central zone ran deep, and there were countless ancient forces here, so it was easy for their actions to be exposed. Therefore, they acted personally. Of course, it was not with their main bodies, but their clones. Chu Zan had once taught them the clone technique, which had come in handy at this moment. After the blood-colored pillars were buried in the Qian regions, arrangements were made for the other 9 regions. The blood-red color of the sky above the central zone was gradually becoming fainter, to the extent where it felt like it might disappear completely soon. However, at the same time, an inexplicable feeling of stagnation began to appear in the hearts of the human race's experts. The next wave of the calamity would probably be here soon. In the Alliance's headquarters, Ji Dexin frowned. Something did not seem right. Why was the Great Dao Yuan calamity developing so quickly? How many years had it been? If this continued, there would probably be Dao realm experts entering the calamity soon. In reality, he did not know that if Chu Zan had not tricked Mo Tu and the others to restrain the Dao realm cultivators in the primordial land, there would probably already have been Dao realm cultivators entering the calamity, even during the first wave. Ji Dexin felt a little uneasy. The 9 zones were currently full of unknown variables, and it was impossible to figure out what was going to happen. Even if this was the Great Dao Yuan calamity before the Great Dao calamity, things should not have progressed so quickly. Something was definitely wrong here. None of the previous Great Dao Yuan calamities he had experienced were like this. Did something change? Things were different from his memories. With the descent of the ancient battlefields, the 9 zones continued to expand in size. Logically speaking, the laws of heaven and earth should have changed and expanded with the 9 zones. Once the Great Dao Yuan calamity ended, the laws of heaven and earth would reach their peak, becoming perfect and complete. However, even though the 9 zones were expanding, the laws of heaven and earth did not seem to be expanding. Ji Dexin was confused. Why was this so? Also, why could he not detect the reason behind this? He was not an ordinary divine realm expert. Even if he had not recovered his strength, his insight surpassed many other divine realm experts. Yet it failed to glean anything about this situation. Focusing, he looked in the direction of the Qian region. For some reason, he felt that the Qian region was a little unusual. The aura of fate there was very strong, but, other than that, there were no other abnormalities. It was not unusual for such a situation to occur during the Great Dao Yuan calamity. Is it related to that Qian Ming person? Qian Ming was a genius and very strong. He rose quickly amidst the Great Dao Yuan and suppressed all of the successors of the ancient forces. Furthermore, the cultivation technique he used was extremely powerful. During the battle, he actually turned Qian Mountain into part of his body. Ji Dexin was not too bothered by this. During the Great Dao Yuan calamity, countless geniuses rose up, but very few made it to the end. Most died during the Great Dao Yuan calamity. After all, the calamity was filled with unknown variables, and the situation could change at any time. Chapter 353, The Great Sacrificial Formation Part 1. Ji Dexin's doubts were destined to go unanswered. Of course, Chu Zan did not realize the impact of the Heavenly Dao Talisman plan on the 9 zones and the Great Dao Yuan calamity. He had thought that if he did it in secret, and did not interfere with the calamity, nothing would change. Little did he know that the Heavenly Dao Law's devouring of the laws of heaven and earth in the 9 zones had in itself pushed forward the development of the Great Dao Yuan calamity. Then again, even if Chu Xian did know, he would still have chosen to proceed with it. This was the best way for him to quickly improve his cultivation. Your Heavenly Dao Laws have taken over the Central Zone's Qian region. Your cultivation level has advanced. The Qian region had finally been incorporated into the Heavenly Dao Laws, and Chu Zan's cultivation experienced another breakthrough. In the entire 9 zones, only the northern zone was completely controlled by the Heavenly Dao Laws. The northern zone was very peaceful, and there were no signs of the calamity, which puzzled the cultivators there. That being said, they were also relieved. No one wanted to deal with the threat of imminent destruction. This was especially true for the smaller races, who had heard of the countless other smaller races in the rest of the 9 zones that were exterminated during the calamity. They chalked it up to the Heavenly Dao Law's protection, and thus continued cultivating and comprehending the Heavenly Dao Laws. As the Heavenly Dao Laws of the Northern Zone continued to improve, the power of fate here was also changing, and a power of fate that belonged to the Heavenly Dao Laws itself was gradually born. The fate of the Heavenly Dao. Boom! All of a sudden, a loud boom resounded throughout the 9 zones. Chu Zan was startled. He looked up at the sky and frowned. Something was not right. The explosion was so powerful that the entire 9 zones shook. Even the Heavenly Dao Laws of the Northern Zone were affected and shook slightly. The laws of heaven and earth in the 9 zones fluctuated like waves. The fate of the 9 zones became more and more ear. The explosion just now was like a thunderclap. Could it be that other than the blood fiends, there are other aspects of the calamity? Chu Zan thought for a moment, and then lay back in his chair. Even if there was a new calamity, it would not affect the north. As long as the Heavenly Dao Laws of the Northern Zone did not collapse, it would not be able to affect him. Not long after the explosion, other than the Northern Zone, the skies in the other 8 zones were dyed red. Countless living beings felt a sense of oppression weighing down upon their hearts. Many small races sensed an existential crisis. The Great Dao Yuan calamity had become stronger. At a certain moment, it started raining blood. The blood rain fell and instantly evaporated upon impact with the ground, transforming into blood-colored spiritual energy. Chu Zan was shocked. It was hard enough to deal with the blood fiends, but now that this blood rain was descending, how could they deal with the blood fiends? Battles everywhere were indeed getting more and more intense. The Chaos Zone finally stopped fighting among themselves. The various races formed an alliance to deal with the blood fiends. The blood rain continued for 3 days, causing even the ground to turn red. The blood fiends sprung up like bamboo shoots after the blood rain, constantly emerging in an unending cycle. The battle in the Central Zone was getting more and more intense. Feng Kong also made his move. Eastern Zone. Qin Ying led Xin Yuanfeng and the other brothers, as well as the Eastern Zone's army, to kill blood fiends continuously. He also organized the women and children of the Eastern Zone to retreat to the Eastern region. The Eastern region was the center of their operations in the most fortified area. Countless older generation cultivators tragically sacrificed themselves and self-destructed to destroy the blood fiends. The crisis intensified. Qin Ying looked at the surging blood-colored spiritual energy and made a difficult decision. One by one, old cultivators, or cultivators who were seriously injured and unable to recover and on the verge of death, entered the eastern region and the southern region. They were scattered around the various earth veins in the eastern region and southern region. Qin Ying stood at the peak of the mountain. Through the Myriad Zones talisman, he was controlling the situation in the southern region. He was silent. At this moment, he did not know if what he was doing was right or wrong. However, he had no other choice. The Great Dao Yuan calamity had made the blood fiend race even stronger, and the Eastern Zone was struggling to hold on. Thanks to the blood rain, the blood fiends could revive infinitely. Human warriors could not. They could not keep fighting like this. Most of the cultivators here were barely holding on by sheer willpower. The blood fiends gradually increased in number and poured into the Eastern region and Southern region. Luo Ming and the other Divine Realm experts of the Eastern Zone looked at Qin Ying silently. It was time for him to make a decision. Chapter 354, The Great Sacrificial Formation, Part 2. This was a test for Qin Ying by the Divine Realm experts of the Eastern Zone. If he passed, then the eastern zone would continue to be under his command throughout the Great Daoyuan calamity. If they did not pass the test and lacked decisiveness and boldness, then they would have to readjust the deployment of the eastern zone. This was the Great Daoyuan calamity. They could not simply blindly support him just because he was the young master of the Luo family. The survival of the human race in the eastern zone was at stake, so the experts of the eastern zone had to be certain that their fate was in good hands. A decisive, bold leader who knew how to seize the opportunity was what the eastern zone needed at the moment. Everyone was silent as they waited. The plan this time was proposed by Qin Ying and supported by many experts and senior cultivators. However, was it not also because they had already decided on this strategy at the crucial moment? It was just that Qin Ying had perfected this strategy to amplify its effect. Could Qin Ying make up his mind at this crucial moment? More and more blood fiends seemed to be attracted by something and kept pouring into the eastern region and southern region. At this moment, those scattered cultivators in the eastern and southern regions began to submerge themselves into the ground. Their eyes were filled with determination. They were going to die anyway, so why not go out with a bang? Qin Ying waited quietly. His expression was cold and expressionless. On his forehead, the heavenly Dao seal was faintly visible. It was almost time. In the eastern region and the southern region, blood fiends were everywhere. Countless blood fiends let out terrifying howls. Dao sacrifice. I bid farewell to all these mighty seniors. This is the final battle for the human race, Qin Ying said coldly. Decisive, resolute, and without any hesitation. He would send off these brave cultivators in glory. Boom! In the eastern region and southern region, pillars of brilliant light shot up into the sky. Each pillar light was located in an earth vein in the eastern region or the southern region, places of vital importance. This group of cultivators sacrificed themselves together. At this moment, the sky above the eastern region and southern region changed. Pale white lines appeared and connected every pillar of light. Great sacrificial formation. Roar. Countless blood fiends roared. However, one by one, they were destroyed and purified by the pale light. The laws of heaven and earth of the eastern region and southern region were shaking and releasing their power, constantly killing and purifying the blood fiends there. Meanwhile, the heavenly Dao laws permeated the regions rapidly and devoured the laws of heaven and earth. Attack. Besiege the blood fiends. The formation masters and artifact refiners from the central, northern and western regions formed teams to set up grand formations. An army of cultivators charged out toward those three regions. Since most of the blood fiends were in the eastern and southern regions, and were being purified at the moment, this was the best time to suppress the blood fiends in the other regions. This had all been arranged by Qin Ying in advance. Xin Yuanfang, Bai Xiaokong, and Qin Ying's other brothers, as well as the other heavens blessed of the eastern zone all led the army's charge. Qin Ying had now been acknowledged by the divine realm experts of the eastern zone. They also started to fight against the divine realm blood fiends. Qin Ying's gaze was cold. He could feel a special aura lingering around his body. His cultivation level was soaring. The Great Daoyuan calamity was also a great opportunity. Where are you, scoundrel Cao? At this moment, Qin Ying thought of Cao Tianyi. He had heard the news that Cao Tianyi had gone crazy. Even if you're crazy, I'll kill you with my own hands sooner or later, Qin Ying muttered to himself. The activation of the great sacrificial formation had sacrificed the lives of 70% of the older generation of cultivators in the eastern zone. Even though they were almost at the end of their lifespans, they had done so willingly. No matter what they had done throughout their lives, this was already worthy of respect. It was through sacrifices like this in the past that the human race had risen to power and, thanks to their sacrifice this time, the human race would definitely defend their position as the overlord race. The situation in the eastern zone had changed completely. The human army began to suppress and besiege blood fiends, constantly wearing them down. Your in-name disciple, Qin Ying, has set up a great sacrificial formation and purified countless blood fiends. His fate has been transformed and his cultivation level has soared. Your fate Dao principle has advanced. Chu Zan sighed. The former great Qin emperor was something else all right. He was decisive and courageous. Those cultivators were truly worthy of respect as well. Your heavenly Dao laws have taken over the eastern region and southern region. Your cultivation level has advanced. Chu Zan's cultivation level broke through again. After Qin Ying completed his work there, he set off on his journey back to the northern zone. While most cultivators were making preparations to combat the calamity there, Qin Ying knew that the northern zone would not be affected. He went back to form the human army of the northern zone to support the eastern zone. Chapter 355. An Ominous Aura Part 1. Qin Ying returned to the Northern Zone as a Divine Realm expert who shouldered the fate of the Great Tao. It was time for the cultivators of the Northern Zone to participate in the Great Tao Yuan calamity. The Northern Zone Expeditionary Army was being formed. Not all cultivators were passionate about fighting for the human race. There were also cultivators who chose to cultivate in peace in the Northern Zone and wait for the Great Tao Yuan calamity to pass. Chu Zan even wondered whether or not it was a good thing that he had made the Northern Zone safe. These cultivators chose to cultivate in peace and ignore the calamity that the human race was facing. On second thought, everyone had their own choices. What was wrong with some people liking a safe environment and not participating in dangerous battles? There were all kinds of people, and it was not strange for some to be afraid of death. Still, Qin Ying was famous in the Northern Zone, so many cultivators flocked under his banner. Most cultivators knew that even though the Northern Zone was peaceful, if the human race was defeated in the Great Tao Yuan calamity and lost their dominant position, the human race in the Northern Zone would soon suffer the same fate. No matter what, they had to overcome the calamity and retain their status as an overlord race of the 9 zones. The expeditionary army of the Northern Zone soon set off. There were many formation masters and artifact refiners who had already made advanced preparations to deal with the Blood Fiend race. It was precisely because the calamity had not descended upon the Northern Zone that these formation masters and artifact refiners could study how to deal with the Blood Fiend race in peace. Naturally, there were results. The first expeditionary army headed east. The situation in the Western Zone was a little strange, as the Blood Fiends there were actually very intelligent. The second expeditionary army would head to the Southern Zone. The expeditionary army heading to the Eastern Zone was naturally led by Qin Ying. The expeditionary army that headed to the Southern Zone would eventually be under Shang Xing's command after they reached the Southern Zone. As the reinforcements to the Eastern and Southern Zones arrived, the situation gradually changed. Although the Blood Fiends emerged in endless numbers, these reinforcements allowed the human race to stabilize the situation. The battle in the Central Zone was the most intense. Dao Realm Blood Fiends appeared one after another. Feng Tong killed a few Dao Realm Blood Fiends in battle and successfully fought for fate, causing his cultivation level to soar. Qian Ming, Wang Luo, and He Yu were all in the middle of planning and preparation. Wang Luo's goal in heading to the Central Zone was to look for the Starry Star Palace. The Starry Sky Palace was an ancient force with Dao Realm experts. Although their Dao Realm experts were half crippled, they were still far stronger than Divine Realm experts. After he completed what he needed to do, he would focus only dealing with the Blood Fiend race in the Central Zone. As for the Tianyu Tower, He Yu had not made her move yet. The time had not come. Boom. A year later, the blood rain appeared again. Chu Zan could not help but frown. Would the Great Tao calamity come after 9 instances of blood rain? It should not be that fast, right? Could it be another wave of the Great Tao Yuan calamity? Many of the participants in the Great Tao communication group felt that something was amiss, as if something was tugging at their hearts. All of the Dao Realm cultivators in the primordial land could sense this. Still, thanks to Hong Yuanchu, Mo Tu, and the other Dao Yuan realm experts, these Dao Realm cultivators were restrained from entering the 9 zones. Chu Zan knew that this situation could not be maintained for long. Once the pull of the Great Tao became too strong, these Dao Realm cultivators would all enter the calamity. He turned his eyes to the Chaos Zone. The expansion of the heavenly Dao laws into the 7 regions there was still ongoing, and would take some time. The little evil king had begun to rise. He had already broken through to the heaven realm. However, he had not found the precious medicine to restore his 3rd leg. Chu Pingfan had also broken through to the heaven realm. The ghost race had expanded further. They had already spread throughout the 9 zones, and traces of them could be found in the desolate ancient zone. The Buddhist zone was still in a stalemate with the Blood Fiend race. Hu Tianya continued to lay low in the Monster Zone. Western Zone. The Blood Fiends here continued to evolve. Ding Yu and Xiao Liang were still fighting in the Western Zone. The southern region was about to be incorporated into the heavenly Dao laws. Time passed quickly and, in the blink of an eye, the 50-year milestone was nigh. A few days ago, the southern region of the Western Zone was finally incorporated into the heavenly Dao laws. However, after doing so, Chu Zan hid the heavenly Dao laws under the guise of the laws of heaven and earth. He wanted to avoid alerting the hidden expert. Chu Zan had already reached the 23rd level of the Dao realm. Ren Cheng was on his way back to the Northern Zone. The current 9 zones had expanded by more than 3 times, including the northern zone. The heavenly Tao laws here had also improved, and all kinds of treasure lands had appeared. The northern zone was becoming more and more prosperous. Other than the human race, the other smaller races had already formed an alliance and occupied 2 treasure lands. Chapter 356, An Ominous Aura Part 2. For the time being, there were no conflicts between the human race and these small races. The small clans did not dare to mess with the human race for fear of being exterminated. There was no calamity in the northern zone, so it was peaceful. While some went to reinforce the other zones, there were also others who thought that the outer zones were too dangerous and decided to stay in the northern zone. Some smaller races that were on the verge of extinction began to migrate to the northern zone after hearing that it was peaceful. As the number of races and living beings in the northern zone increased, the heavenly Tao laws were also strengthened. Chu Zan was happy to see this. For the sake of the diversity of living beings in the northern zone, he had even intervened to prevent some smaller races from being exterminated by human martial artists. They would be protected like endangered species. Apart from these smaller races, there was no lack of humans that migrated to the northern zone. Many human cultivators subconsciously treated the northern zone as their last bastion. However, unless they had no other choice, they would not give up on the other 4 zones. If they lost these 4 zones, how could the human race maintain their position as an overlord race? Thanks to the expansion of the northern zone's territory, it could accommodate all of these migrants. Chu Zan patiently waited for the 50-year milestone reward. In the desolate ancient region, Ren Cheng was making his way back to the northern zone. It was rare to see any divine realm cultivators here now. Almost all of them had returned to their respective zones to fight the blood fiends. Those that were here were either trapped in mystic and forbidden realms, or hiding like the defeated demon race. Even the crazy Cao Tianyi seemed to have disappeared. One day, Ren Cheng arrived at a large river called the Desolate Ancient Thunder River. In addition to the rumbling thunder, there were occasional lightning bolts in the river, and thunderfish jumping out of the water. The thunderfish was unique to this river, and was also how the river had received its name. The lightning bolts released by the thunderfish were no weaker than an Emperor Realm cultivator's attack. Furthermore, it was not a demonic beast, but just an ordinary beast. Its flesh contained the power of lightning and could temper one's body. It was effective even for Emperor Realm cultivators. Some Divine Realm experts would catch thunderfish and send them back to their families or sects once in a while to help their descendants cultivate and temper their bodies. Other than being able to temper one's body, thunderfish was extremely delicious. It was one of the tastiest things in the desolate ancient zone. Even Divine Realm experts who no longer needed to eat would sometimes catch a few thunderfish to eat. Voila! In the turbulent river, a fish jumped out of the water, and lightning flashed. Ren Cheng was used to this and did not stop walking. He walked lightly atop the flowing river water. Occasionally, a thunderfish would leap up beside him, hurling a lightning bolt his way. Voila! Suddenly, a fish jumped out of the water. This pitch-black fish exuded a faint grayish-black aura. Wisps of black lightning surrounded it, and its eyes were red. There were long bone spikes on its back. The fins seemed to have grown into 2 small claws. It had a big head and a mouth, with sharp black teeth. The fish was extremely violent. It leapt out of the water and charged at Ren Cheng. Ren Cheng was shocked. It appeared to be some sort of mutated thunderfish. What surprised him even more was that even the lightning bolts it released were black. Ren Cheng ignored the attack. An Emperor Realm attack was like an ant bite to him. He continued to move forward, and flicked his finger at the fish, destroying it. However, after the mutated thunder fish was destroyed, there was still a faint grayish-black gas left behind, which contaminated the power that Ren Cheng had released. As his power returned, Ren Cheng suddenly felt his heart palpitate, as if a great disaster was about to befall him. His expression changed slightly, and he immediately cut it off. After he cut it off, the grayish-black gas actually assimilated his power and grew a little stronger before submerging itself into the river. Voila! A thunderfish jumped out of the water into the grayish-black gas, after which it fell back into the water. Ren Cheng stopped in his tracks and frowned slightly. What was that wisp of grayish-black gas? Why did it give him a feeling that a great calamity was coming? He was a peak Divine Realm expert, and his comprehension of the Yin and Yang Dao was extremely deep. He was already close to reaching the Dao realm. Voila! The same fish jumped out of the water. At this moment, this fish was changing. The fish's body began to turn black and gradually began to show signs of mutating. Ren Cheng raised his hand and waved. A furnace was set up and the fish was placed into it. Upon closer inspection, the mutation was found to be due to that wisp of grayish-black gas. As Ren Chang looked at the wisp of grayish-black gas, he felt more and more alarmed, and he had a bad premonition. He took a deep breath, and a wisp of death power appeared in his hand, which he sent into the furnace. The fish died and gradually turned into nothingness. As for the death power, it was contaminated by the grayish-black qi and gradually assimilated. Even death power can be assimilated. Ren Chang realized how unusual the wisp of grayish-black gas was. He then sent life power into the furnace. When the life power entered, the grayish-black gas surrounded the life power, but did not assimilate it. Ren Chang heaved a sigh of relief. Life power could deal with this strange grayish-black gas. Just as he was about to retrieve the life power, he suddenly felt an ominous feeling in his heart. He hurriedly stopped. Frowning, he looked at it carefully. He realized that there was something wrong with this wisp of life power. As for what was wrong, Ren Chang could not tell. There seemed to be something inside the life power. Ren Chang looked at the Thunder River. For some reason, he felt uneasy. He had a feeling that something big was about to happen. There was no sign of a second deformed fish or a second wisp of grayish-black gas. Ren Chang continued to move forward, crossing the Thunder River. He observed the grayish-black gas in the furnace and the wisp of life power. What changes have occurred? Ren Chang furrowed his brows. Outwardly, that wisp of life power seemed fine. However, upon closer inspection, it seemed to have been contaminated by something and was undergoing some changes. Even though this wisp of life power was Ren Changhei's own power, at this moment, he could not figure out what was going on. A few miles away, there was a wild beast. Ren Chang immediately captured the wild beast. Then, he created a small wound on the wild beast's leg. With a wave of his hand, the life power in the furnace entered the wound on the beast's leg, after which the bleeding stopped instantly. The wild beast also became more energetic. There doesn't seem to be a problem. Ren Chang frowned again. There had to have been some changes in that wisp of life power. However, it did not seem to have any abnormalities when used on this wild beast. He believed in his senses. It could not be wrong. That wisp of life power was unusual. Ren Chang stared at the wild beast and observed it carefully. However, he did not notice that the furnace in his hand, which was filled with grayish-black gas, had gradually become contaminated with the grayish-black gas. It was shrouded in an unknown and ominous aura. Chapter 357, An Ominous Aura Part 3. Ren Chang observed the beast. As time passed, the beast gradually changed. Its eyes turned red, and it seemed to become irritated. What was even more terrifying was that fangs appeared, and bone spikes grew on its back. It was gradually mutating into a strange beast. Moreover, the strength of the wild beast had increased, and it was even emitting a special power. Ren Chang was shocked. What exactly was that grayish-black has? Why was it causing these changes? Roar! The beast suddenly stared at Ren Chang and let out a strange roar. A grayish-black aura appeared around its body, and that faint grayish-black gas surrounded it. The mutated beast suddenly pounced at him. Ren Chang stood still, but the beast disintegrated in midair. The mutated beast was dead, but there was still some grayish-black gas lingering in the spot where it died. Ren Chang furrowed his brows. When did such a strange thing appear in the desolate ancient zone? Had he only encountered this wisp of grayish-black gas by chance, or had it already appeared in other parts of the desolate ancient zone? All of a sudden, Ren Chang felt a sense of danger. The hair on his body stood up, and his whole body tensed up. In an instant, spiritual power surrounded his body, and he became vigilant toward his surroundings. There was a strong enemy. A very powerful enemy. Ren Changhei's sense of danger grew stronger and stronger. What made him uneasy was that he did not detect any enemies. The more this was the case, the more vigilant he became, as if he was facing a great enemy. Suddenly, he felt his scalp go numb. The furnace in his hand was originally filled with grayish-black gas, but now the entire furnace had almost turned grayish-black. The strong sense of danger did not come from the powerful enemies hiding around him, but from the furnace in his hand. He was actually unable to accurately determine the source of the crisis. Ren Chang released the furnace immediately, and a force lifted the furnace and suspended it in midair. Furthermore, he was prepared to cut off this force at any time. The strange grayish-black gas had even contaminated the furnace. It was a heaven-grade artifact. Ren Chang had a premonition that the consequences would be very serious if he were to be infected by the grayish-black gas. Boom! Ren Changhei's expression was grave. Two streams of black and white power surrounded the furnace, suppressing and destroying it. He wanted to see if he could destroy the grayish-black gas. He was at the peak of the divine realm, but was somehow struggling to destroy a heaven-grade artifact. After being contaminated by the grayish-black gas, the furnace had transformed, making it difficult to destroy. Ren Cheng continued to increase his strength. The power of yin and yang he cultivated continuously bombarded the furnace. As Ren Cheng gradually increased his strength, cracks appeared on the furnace and it gradually began to shatter. Then, the furnace shattered with a bang. The grayish-black gas that had corroded the furnace seemed to gradually fade and disappear as the furnace shattered. Finally, the furnace turned into dust, and the grayish-black gas disappeared. However, Ren Chenghe's expression was extremely grave. He sensed that the furnace seemed to have become an ominous object after being contaminated. Whatever it touched would face an unknown disaster or even a terrifying mutation. The moment the furnace turned to dust and the grayish-black gas disappeared, Ren Cheng vaguely sensed that his fate seemed to have transformed. The bottleneck of the Tao realm seemed to have loosened a little. Chu Zan was originally lying on the chair, drinking the tea Su Shan'er made and eating the desserts she made, living a carefree life. Then, the system's reward suddenly arrived. Chu Zan sat up straight. He was too shocked. Your in-name disciple, Ren Cheng, has destroyed the first ominous item in the 9 zones. His fate has transformed. Your fate Tao principle has advanced. An ominous item. The first thing Chu Zan thought of was the strange black power on the Great Tao. Had it already spread to the 9 zones? Had the Great Tao calamity begun? At this moment, Chu Zan was no longer calm. The strange black power on the Great Tao was something that could even corrode Yi Yujun, a creature of the Great Tao. If it spread to the 9 zones, the consequences would be terrible. The heavenly Tao laws were not strong enough to withstand the Great Tao calamity. He immediately took out the myriad heavenly mirror and connected it to Ren Cheng. The image projection appeared. Ren Cheng was standing there with a pensive look on his face. Chu Zan's eyes swept across the area. Not far from Ren Cheng, there was a faint ominous aura, but it was fading and disappearing. There was an ominous object there that had been destroyed by Ren Cheng. Chu Zan examined it carefully. The lingering ominous aura exuded disaster, inauspiciousness, and corrosive power. If a divine realm cultivator was infected, they would be unable to resist it, and would eventually become an ominous being. Chapter 358. An Ominous Aura Part 4. However, it was unable to affect Tao realm experts, probably because it was too thin. Chu Zan let out a sigh of relief. There were no blood fiends in the desolate ancient zone, but this grayish-black gas had appeared here instead. Chu Zan pondered for a moment. He did not meet Ren Cheng and decided to wait until the latter returned to the northern zone. Deactivating the mirror, Chu Zan looked up at the sky above the 9 zones. The great Tao Yuan calamity would not pass so quickly. Even the Tao realm experts had yet to enter the calamity. The appearance of ominous objects in the desolate ancient zone did not mean that the great Tao calamity was here. He had to steady himself and keep calm. The heavenly Tao talisman plan was still progressing, and it would not be long before the 7 regions of the Chaos Zone were incorporated into the heavenly Tao laws. The 50-year milestone was almost here. There should be a good reward from the system when it arrived. Monster Zone. The Monster Zone was in chaos. Under the leadership of the Azure Dragon tribe, they were resisting the Blood Fiends. As there were many monster tribes, there was no lack of tribes with special innate abilities. They might not be too strong, but they had certain advantages against the Blood Fiends. These races were naturally valued and their status rose. They had already stabilized the situation and continued to surround and eliminate the Blood Fiends. The Blood Fiend race was about to be eradicated from the Monster Zone, but then something unexpected happened. The Blood Fiend race started to change. It seemed to have been contaminated by some strange power. The monsters that were fighting them also started mutating, losing their minds and turning on their allies. The Azure Dragon tribe lost 1/3 of their experts in an instant. Gradually, they ended up fighting not only the Blood Fiends, but also these mutated monster race members. A great defeat. The entire monster race panicked. Once someone was contaminated by that grayish-black gas, it was almost impossible to get rid of. On the Heavenly Tiger tribe's mountain, Hu Tianya was lying down. Every breath he took was filled with a cold divine might. At this moment, he was in the middle of a transformation. Once the transformation was complete, he would reach the divine realm. His bloodline would also be purified, and he would become a bona fide divine beast. The Grand Elder of the Heavenly Tiger tribe walked over, his face filled with unease. The situation is bad. A strange phenomenon has appeared in the monster zone. Hu Tianya opened his eyes and calmly said, "Don't worry. Stay calm. I'm just afraid that the other tribes won't be able to hold on." Hu Tianya was silent for a moment. His claws moved, and a small book floated out. He said, "Follow the instructions and set up the formation. You must stabilize the situation and wait for me." The Grand Elder took the booklet, glanced through it briefly, and left. On this day, the Heavenly Tiger race started to mobilize, leading many monster tribes to set up a formation to stop the ominous beings from occupying their territory. The Azure Dragon tribe had suffered heavy losses and their overall strength had already fallen. Currently, the Heavenly Tiger tribe was the leader of the monster zone. 1/3 of the entire monster race seemed to have mutated into ominous beings. Together with the Blood Fiends, they assaulted the monster race's lines of defense. The defense lines were broken one after another. Those ominous beings continued mutating, to the point that one could not even recognize their original forms. None of the monsters dared to engage in close combat with these ominous beings for fear of being contaminated by the grayish-black gas. They could only attack from a distance, which limited the power of their attacks. Bang! All of a sudden, an ominous mutated being exploded, spewing out a grayish-black gas. It was not caused by an attack, but it seemed that it had automatically exploded and died. However, at the place where it exploded, the grayish-black gas became thicker. The monster race's lines of defense continued to be pushed back, and they lost more and more ground. They felt despair. Was the monster race going to be exterminated? These ominous beings were even more terrifying than the Blood Fiend race, and were even more difficult to deal with. The Blood Fiends could revive and become stronger. However, they would not corrode and mutate people. It was too terrifying. Even the methods that could purify the blood-colored spiritual energy were useless against the ominous beings. It seemed that they could only hope that the ominous beings all exploded and died before they could fully conquer the monster zone. The Heavenly Tiger tribe placed their hopes on Hu Tianya. The Grand Elder was here on the mountain again. Before he even got close, he could already feel a wave of pressure. Hu Tianya was clearly not as strong as he was. However, at this moment, the Grand Elder felt a sense of fear. It was as if there was a terrifying being in front of him. He advanced with great difficulty, but in the end, he still could not reach the peak. Hu Tianya's bloodline had suppressed him. Although his body was reacting this way, he was ecstatic. They had to hold on until Hu Tianya came out of secluded cultivation. He was the key to the Heavenly Tiger tribe's rise and also the monster race's salvation. The Grand Elder turned and left. The monster race's lines of defense retreated again and again. In a short span of time, 2/3 of the monster zone had been conquered. There were talks of abandoning the entire zone to occupy territory elsewhere, perhaps in the Chaos Zone. Just as the experts of the monster race were discussing their escape route and sending experts to the Chaos Zone to investigate the situation there, a vast wave of pressure swept out from the Heavenly Tiger tribe's mountain. Hu Tianya stood up. His entire body was surrounded by a white light. Roar! A tiger's roar shook the heavens. White Tiger bloodline awakening. Hu Tianya transformed into the White Tiger divine beast. With a roar, he leapt and headed toward the front lines of the battle. A roar came from afar, and he did not restrain his aura at all. In that instant, countless monsters turned pale with fright and revealed their monster forms. Hu Tianya looked awe-inspiring as he arrived at the front lines. The experts of the monster race, including those from the Azure Dragon race, could not help but tremble. The pressure they felt from their bloodlines and souls made them tremble. What was going on with Hu Tianya? The Heavenly Tiger tribe was overjoyed. Hu Tianya had completed his transformation. From now on, the Heavenly Tiger tribe would become the ruling tribe of the monster race. Hu Tianya let out a roar and charged toward the ominous beings. His killing intent surged forth, and a ring of white light enveloped his body. The grayish-black gas was actually unable to contaminate him, and the ring of white light seemed to cleanse it. Shua! With a wave of its claws, he instantly killed an ominous being. Chapter 359, An Ominous Aura Part 5. Hu Tianya had transformed into the White Tiger divine beast. He had incredible power and was immune to the effects of the grayish-black gas. That being said, he was still a young divine beast, and would need time to fully realize the potential of his bloodline. Even so, he was still qualified to lead the monster race in their battle against the calamity. Your disciple, Hu Tianya, has transformed into the White Tiger divine beast. His fate has been transformed. Your fate Tao principle has advanced. Your disciple, Hu Tianya, exuded awe-inspiring divine might. He killed the ominous beings and has assumed the mantle of leadership over the monster race. You have been rewarded with the might Tao principle. Obtaining 2 system rewards was beyond Chuzan's expectations. However, it seemed that the ominous beings had appeared in the monster zone. This was concerning. Chuzan received the rewards. His new Tao principle filled him with a sense of unparalleled power. It seemed that the might Tao principle was also a nascent great Tao principle. Now, Chuzan's only limitation was his cultivation level. He had 3 nascent great Tao principles, which would allow him to reach the Taoyuan realm at any time. Still, he did not want to rely on these to reach the Taoyuan realm. He wanted to create his own great Tao, one that encompassed everything. Only in this way would he have the chance of surpassing the great Tao. After Hu Tianya transformed into a divine beast, he led the monster race and began to suppress the ominous beings. Hu Tianya's divine beast body was actually immune to the effects of the grayish-black gas. Of course, this was because the density of the grayish-black gas in the monster zone was currently very thin. With the rise of Hu Tianya, the heavenly Tao laws also increased their rate of expansion into the monster zone. A few days later, the western region of the monster zone, where the heavenly tiger tribe was located, was incorporated into the heavenly Tao laws. Your heavenly Tao laws have taken over the western region of the monster zone. Your cultivation level has advanced. 24th level of the Tao realm. In the group chat, the soaring flood dragon king suddenly spoke up. I don't know what's going on, but I can faintly sense that the monster zone has undergone some changes. Hu Tai also spoke up, I've sensed it too. I've also noticed that the fate of my heavenly tiger tribe seems to have changed. The 2 monster race Taoyuan realm experts were very confused. The monster race's fate seemed to have become stronger, but there were also some other changes. It was as if the fate of the monster race had gathered in one place and was changing. Furthermore, Hu Tai felt his bloodline resonating with something. Of course, whenever these Taoyuan realm experts had any doubts, they would seek out Chuzan, which was exactly what the soaring flood dragon king did. Chuzan naturally understood why these changes occurred. After all, it was all related to his disciple, Hu Tianya, and his transformation into a divine beast. It's a good thing that the monster race has a person with great fate, Chuzan said. They were overjoyed, and both were secretly hoping that the person with great fate was from their tribe. Chuzan muttered in his heart, the white tiger divine beast is the ancestor of all tigers, so even Hu Tai would have to bow down to Hu Tianya once the latter became a Taoyuan expert. After all, these divine beasts had once ruled the monster race before they left the 9 zones. Although this is a good thing, don't act rashly. The great calamity can even use good things to tempt you to enter the calamity, so be careful. Thank you for your reminder, Brother Chu. They both said gratefully. Chapter 360, Demon Buddha's Turn. In their hearts, the terror of the great calamity deepened. This was Chuzan's only method to delay the progress of the calamity. As long as the Tao realm and Taoyuan realm experts did not enter the calamity, its development would not get out of control. Chuzan knew that his intervention would only be temporary, and that these experts would enter the calamity later on. After dealing with this matter, Chuzan turned his attention to the monster zone, examining the grayish-black gas. His brows furrowed slightly. Chuzan was certain that the grayish-black gas originated from the Great Tao Calamity. Other than the desolate ancient zone, the monster zone was the first zone that had been affected by this grayish-black gas. Chuzan frowned. It seemed that this grayish-black gas also had the power to contaminate the laws of heaven and earth. Half of the laws of heaven and earth in the monster zone were tainted by the grayish-black gas. If the heavenly Tao laws devoured the laws of heaven and earth here, it would have to drive out or purify the grayish-black gas. Would that be considered as interfering with the Great Tao Calamity? Would it expose the heavenly Tao laws? Chuzan pondered for a while and decided to hide the heavenly Tao laws. They would remain dormant in the monster zone. Although they would not actively expel and purify the grayish-black gas, they would repel it in order to avoid contamination. He would allow Hu Tianya and the living beings of the monster zone to deal with it. Hu Tianya led the monster army in battle against the ominous beings. Under his leadership, they began to retake a portion of their previously conquered territories. Chuzan looked at the eastern zone. Ever since Qin Ying set up the great sacrificial formation and eliminated most of the blood fiends, things had gradually turned in their favor. They had temporarily achieved victory against the blood fiend race here. In the southern zone, Shangxing was on the move. As for Shang Bang, he was actually on the verge of reaching the Dao realm. After the southern zone's nascent blood world was suppressed, the blood fiends seemed to have become easier to kill. The western zone was still in a stalemate. Furthermore, the blood fiends had established defensive lines to maintain their territory. As such, no one knew what was going on behind their borders in the western region and northern region. Even the ghost race was not willing to enter those regions. The chaos zone was still fighting the blood fiends, but the overall situation was still under control. The fiercest fighting was taking place in the central zone. Chu Zan felt that after the central zone dealt with the blood fiends, the blood fiend calamity would most likely end, and the great Daoyuan calamity would enter a new phase. Of course, the blood fiends in the western zone would not disappear. They would become a new race of the 9 zones and join the fight for fate amidst the great Daoyuan calamity. Chu Zan felt that the blood fiend race in the western zone was gathering strength, waiting for the right opportunity. He did not know what the hidden expert was plotting. Time passed day by day. Ren Cheng was searching for clues regarding the grayish-black gas in the desolate ancient zone, so he did not return immediately to the northern zone. There were only 10 days left until the 50-year milestone. Chu Zan was filled with anticipation. Your disciple, Demon Buddha, has converted a blood fiend into a Buddhist. His fate has transformed and his cultivation level has soared. Your fate Dao principle has advanced. The blood fiend converted to Buddhism, and the fate of the Buddhist clan has been transformed. The Buddhist world has expanded, and the Buddhist Dao principle has advanced. Your fate Dao principle has advanced. Chu Zan was stunned. What was going on? A blood fiend converted to Buddhism. Chu Zan was shocked by Demon Buddha. How did he convert the calamity-bearing blood fiend into a Buddhist? It was too King awesome. Those blood fiends were violent and battle-hungry. Chu Zan took out the myriad heavenly mirror and connected it to Demon Buddha. At that moment, the Buddhist light from the 3 regions held by the Buddhist clan was quickly spreading toward the 2 regions held by the blood fiends, and the blood-colored spiritual energy was rapidly dissipating. In front of Demon Buddha, there was a blood fiend, whose scarlet body was engulfed by Buddhist light. The blood fiend's expression was no longer brutal, and its fangs had disappeared. Furthermore, its head was bald. Although it still retained some of the characteristics of the blood fiend race, it had undoubtedly converted to Buddhism. It was even chanting scriptures in a very pious manner. It seemed that it had gained intelligence as well. It knelt in front of Demon Buddha like a worshipper. You were born from sin and have great resentment and evil. Let go of your past and your obsessions. Everything will be void. It's a great merit to convert to Buddhism. You've converted to Buddhism and found your way back to the light. From now on, you are no longer a blood fiend. You are an arhat of the Buddhist clan. I shall grant you the name Sha Kong. Demon Buddha's appearance was solemn.